Imagine this. A single conversation could change your salary, your business, your opportunities, maybe even the entire direction of your life. Yet most people walk into these conversations completely unprepared. They believe negotiation is about being aggressive, about pushing harder, about arguing better, about winning. But the truth is far more surprising. Negotiation is not about winning the argument. It's about understanding the person sitting across from you. Think about the last time you tried to convince someone of something important, a client, a manager, a partner, maybe even someone close to you. Chances are you focused on logic, facts, reasons, numbers. But here's the reality. People don't make decisions with logic first. They make decisions with emotion, fear of making the wrong move, desire for respect, need for control, uncertainty about risk. And when those emotions are ignored, even the most logical argument can fail. The best negotiators in the world understand something most people don't. The real battle in negotiation is not over numbers. It's over emotions. When people feel unheard, they resist. When they feel misunderstood, they push back. But when they feel truly understood, something remarkable happens. Their defenses drop. And that is where real negotiation begins. Imagine being able to sit in a tense conversation and immediately lower the emotional temperature. Imagine being able to ask questions so powerful that the other person begins solving the problem with you instead of fighting against you. Imagine turning a no from a rejection into the beginning of a breakthrough. These are not tricks. They are psychological principles that have been used in some of the most extreme negotiations imaginable. Situations where lives, not just money, were at stake. The same strategies that calm a hostage taker can transform the way you handle business deals, salary discussions, partnerships, and everyday conflicts. Because negotiation is happening everywhere around you. When you ask for a raise, when you set boundaries with clients, when you close a deal. When you divide responsibilities at home, when you decide how your time, money, and energy will be used. Every one of those moments is a negotiation, and the difference between average results and extraordinary outcomes often comes down to how those conversations unfold. The most powerful negotiators don't dominate conversations. They guide them. They listen carefully, they mirror words, they label emotions, they ask calibrated questions that shift the pressure without creating conflict. Instead of forcing agreement, they create understanding. And understanding unlocks possibilities most people never even see. Because when you truly understand the other side, what they fear, what they value, what pressures they face, you gain the ultimate advantage: clarity. With clarity, you can shape conversations, uncover hidden opportunities, and reach agreements that benefit both sides. Negotiation stops feeling like a fight. It starts feeling like discovery. And once you learn how to navigate these conversations with patience, empathy, and precision, you begin to realize something powerful. The opportunities around you were never as limited as they seemed. They were simply waiting for the right conversation. Imagine this for a moment. You're sitting across a table. The room is quiet, but the silence is not comfortable. On the other side is someone who holds something you want. Maybe a deal, maybe a job, maybe a contract, maybe even your future. And most people in that moment believe negotiation is about one thing: pushing harder than the other person. But that belief is exactly why most people lose. For years, the world believed negotiation was a logical process. Numbers versus numbers, offers versus counteroffers. Whoever calculated better would win. But reality doesn't work that way. Human beings are not rational machines. They are emotional creatures who justify decisions with logic afterward. And if you walk into any negotiation believing facts alone will win the day, you're already walking in blind. Let me take you somewhere that proves this better than any business meeting ever could. Years ago, before the business world started inviting me into boardrooms and executive offices, my office looked very different. My negotiations didn't happen over conference tables. They happened over phones at 3 in the morning. The stakes weren't profits or promotions. The stakes were lives. As a hostage negotiator, dealing with kidnappers, bank robbers, and criminals who had pushed themselves to the edge of desperation, I learned something the world rarely teaches. When people feel cornered, logic disappears. Emotion takes control. Fear speaks louder than reason. Pride becomes dangerous. Ego becomes explosive. And in those moments, if you tried to win the argument, people got hurt. So the goal was never to overpower the other side. The goal was to understand them better than they understood themselves. Negotiation at its core is not about domination. It is about connection. And once you understand that truth, you realize something remarkable. The same psychology that saves lives in a crisis can transform every negotiation you face in everyday life. The first mistake most people make is believing negotiation begins when the conversation starts. It doesn't. Negotiation begins the moment the other person forms an opinion about you. Before you speak, before you make an offer, before you even sit down, their brain is already running calculations. Are you trustworthy? Are you threatening? Are you respectful? Are you arrogant? Are you someone worth cooperating with? These judgments happen fast, silently, emotionally. And here's the part many professionals miss. People rarely say what they actually feel. Instead, they hide behind polite language. A client says, "Our price is a little high." But what they might mean is, "I'm afraid this investment won't work." A manager says, "Let me think about it." But what they might mean is, "I don't trust this yet." A partner says, "I'm not sure." But what they might mean is, "I feel uncomfortable." Negotiation is not about listening to words. No, it is about listening for emotion hiding behind the words. This is where most negotiations are lost. People rush to defend themselves. They explain, they justify, they argue. But when someone feels unheard, logic cannot reach them. If you want to influence someone, the first step is surprisingly simple and incredibly powerful. Make them feel understood, not manipulated, not analyzed, understood. Because when someone feels truly heard, something changes inside their mind. Their defenses lower, their stress decreases. Their brain shifts from protection mode to cooperation mode. This principle is what I call tactical empathy. Empathy is not agreeing with someone. It's not surrendering your position. It's not giving them control. Empathy is the ability to recognize what another person feels and show them you see it. When someone realizes you genuinely understand their perspective, they begin to trust you. And trust is the foundation of every successful negotiation. But here's where things get interesting. Most people believe trust is built by talking. In reality, trust is built by listening. The best negotiators in the world talk less than everyone else in the room. They observe, they watch body language, they listen to tone shifts, they notice hesitation. Because hidden inside those small signals are the real motivations driving the conversation. Let me give you a simple example. Imagine you're negotiating a salary. Most candidates walk in with numbers prepared. They focus entirely on the offer they want to make. But a master negotiator walks in focused on something different, the other side's pressure. What does the company need right now? What problems are they trying to solve? What deadlines are they facing? What fears are sitting quietly beneath their decision? Once you understand those pressures, the negotiation transforms. You are no longer begging for opportunity. You are positioning yourself as the solution to their problem. And the moment the other side sees you as a solution instead of a request, your leverage increases dramatically. This principle applies everywhere. Business deals, real estate negotiations, partnership discussions, salary conversations. Even everyday relationships. Because every negotiation is driven by the same invisible forces: fear of loss, desire for control, need for respect, search for safety. If you address those emotional drivers, the numbers become easier to resolve. But if you ignore them, even the perfect logical offer can fail. Now, here's something that might surprise you. One of the most powerful negotiation tools is not persuasion, it's curiosity. When you approach a negotiation with genuine curiosity about the other person's situation, you uncover information they never intended to reveal. Not because you tricked them, because people naturally open up when they feel safe, and safety in negotiation doesn't come from power. It comes from understanding. This is why great negotiators ask better questions than everyone else. Not aggressive questions, not interrogations. Calibrated questions, questions designed to invite thinking. Instead of saying, "Ooh, that price is too high," a skilled negotiator might ask, "How did you arrive at that number?" Instead of saying, "Ooh, we can't do that," they might ask, "What would it take for this to work?" These questions shift the dynamic. They move the conversation away from confrontation and toward collaboration. And suddenly the other side begins solving the problem with you instead of fighting against you. That is negotiation at its highest level, not war, not compromise, alignment. And this leads us to a powerful financial principle hidden inside negotiation. Every major financial outcome in your life is negotiated: your salary, your business contracts, your investments, your partnerships, your opportunities. People often think financial freedom is purely about earning more money, but the truth is financial freedom is also about negotiating better terms, better compensation, better equity, better agreements, better timelines. The difference between average and extraordinary results often comes down to one skill: the ability to navigate difficult conversations without triggering conflict. And that skill can be learned. You don't need to be aggressive. You don't need to be intimidating. You need to be perceptive. Because negotiation is not about overpowering the other side. It's about guiding them toward a decision that works for both sides while preserving dignity, respect, and trust. In the next part of this journey, we'll explore a technique so deceptively simple that most people underestimate it completely, yet it has the power to transform conversations instantly. A technique that can lower hostility, build connection, and unlock information the other side never intended to reveal. It's called mirroring. And once you understand how it works, you'll begin hearing negotiations in a completely different way. Now let's go deeper. Because once you understand that negotiation is driven by emotion rather than logic, the next question becomes obvious. How do you access those emotions without triggering resistance? This is where a deceptively simple tool comes into play, something so subtle that most people overlook it entirely. Mirroring. It sounds almost too simple to matter, but in negotiation, the simplest tools are often the most powerful. Let me show you why. Imagine you're sitting across from someone and they say, "This deal feels risky." Most people respond immediately with explanations. They defend their position. They begin presenting data. But a skilled negotiator does something different. They pause and repeat the last few important words. Feels risky. That's it. No argument, no explanation, just reflection. What happens next is fascinating. Human beings are naturally wired to elaborate when their words are reflected back to them. It creates a subtle psychological invitation to explain more. The brain interprets the mirror as interest, not confrontation, and suddenly the other person continues speaking. "Oh, well, the last time we tried something like this, it didn't work." Now you're learning something critical. Their fear isn't about your offer. It's about a past experience. If you had jumped into defense mode immediately, you would have missed that completely. Mirroring works because it slows conversations down, and slowing conversations down is incredibly important in negotiation. When people feel rushed, they become defensive. They protect themselves. They retreat into safe positions, but when conversations move calmly, thoughtfully, the brain begins to open. Mirroring also does something else powerful. It builds subconscious rapport. When two people mirror each other's language patterns and pacing, their brains begin to perceive familiarity. Familiarity reduces threat, and reduced threat increases cooperation. In hostage negotiations, we used mirroring constantly, not because it was clever, but because it kept conversations alive. When someone is angry, desperate, or scared, silence combined with mirroring encourages them to release emotional pressure. The more they talk, the more information they reveal. Information is leverage. Now let me share another principle that might change how you approach every difficult conversation you'll ever have. Silence is not your enemy. Most people fear silence during negotiation. The moment the conversation pauses, they rush to fill the space. But silence is incredibly powerful. Silence creates tension, and human beings naturally try to relieve tension by speaking. If you mirror someone's words and then remain quiet, you create space for them to expand their thoughts. Often they will reveal motivations, concerns, and hidden constraints you never would have discovered otherwise. The less you talk, the more the other side reveals, and the more they reveal, the more precisely you can guide the negotiation. This brings us to something extremely important. Tone of voice. Words matter, but tone matters more. You can say the exact same sentence in 3 different tones and create 3 completely different reactions. A harsh tone triggers resistance. A nervous tone signals weakness. A calm tone signals control. The most effective negotiators use what I like to call the calm, confident voice. It's steady, it's respectful, it's relaxed. When someone hears that tone, their brain subconsciously relaxes. It tells them you are not a threat. And when people feel safe, they reveal more undone. Think about how this applies to business. Imagine negotiating a contract with a potential client. They say, your proposal is higher than we expected. If your voice immediately becomes defensive, the conversation becomes tense. But if you calmly mirror their words, higher than you expected, they will often explain the real concern. Maybe their budget is tight. Maybe they're comparing you to a cheaper competitor. Maybe they don't fully understand the value yet. Now you're negotiating reality instead of guessing. That difference is enormous. Negotiation is not a battle of arguments. It's a discovery process. Your goal is to uncover what the other side truly cares about, and the fastest way to do that is to encourage them to keep talking. Mirroring is the doorway to deeper dialogue, but it works best when paired with another powerful concept: labeling. Labeling is the act of identifying and verbalizing the other person's emotions. For example, it sounds like you're worried about making the wrong decision. Or, it seems like this timeline is putting a lot of pressure on your team. When you label emotions accurately, something remarkable happens. The other person feels seen. And when people feel understood, their emotional intensity drops. Neuroscience actually supports this. When emotions are named, the brain's emotional centers begin to calm down. The feeling loses some of its grip. This allows the rational part of the brain to re-engage. So by simply identifying someone's emotions, you help them regain clarity. And clarity opens the door to agreement. Now let's connect this to something practical: financial outcomes. In business negotiations, people often assume the biggest obstacle is price. But in reality, price is rarely the real problem. The real problem is uncertainty. Uncertainty about results, uncertainty about risk, uncertainty about trust. If someone trusts you and feels safe, they often accept higher prices. But if they feel uncertain, even the lowest price can feel dangerous. This is why emotional intelligence is so valuable in negotiation. It reduces uncertainty, and reduced uncertainty increases willingness to move forward. Think about some of the most important negotiations in your life: a job offer, a major purchase, a partnership agreement. In each case, the outcome likely depended on more than numbers. It depended on perception, perception of value, perception of fairness, perception of safety. Skilled negotiators shape those perceptions through conversation. They guide the emotional landscape before they ever discuss numbers. And when the emotional environment is right, the numbers become easier to resolve. But here's a truth many people struggle to accept. Negotiation is not about dominating the other side. It's about creating a situation where the other side feels comfortable saying yes. That comfort comes from trust. Trust comes from understanding. Understanding comes from listening. And listening begins with tools like mirroring. As you begin to practice this skill, you'll notice something fascinating. People start revealing far more than you expected. They talk longer. They explain their reasoning. They show you the invisible constraints shaping their decisions. And when you understand those constraints, you gain something incredibly valuable: perspective. Perspective allows you to propose solutions that actually work for both sides. And when both sides feel like they are solving the problem together, negotiation transforms from confrontation into collaboration. In the next part, we'll explore another powerful shift in negotiation thinking, one that contradicts what most people believe about compromise. Because the truth is, splitting the difference often leads to the worst possible outcomes. And once you understand why, you'll never negotiate the same way again. Let's talk about something that sounds fair, but often leads to terrible outcomes: compromise. Most people are raised to believe compromise is the ultimate goal of negotiation. Meet in the middle, split the difference. Be reasonable. It sounds civil. It sounds balanced. It sounds like the mature solution. But in reality, splitting the difference is often the fastest way to create a bad deal for both sides. Let me show you why. Imagine you're negotiating the price of a car. The seller asks for $30,000. You offered $20,000. Eventually, you settle in the middle at $25,000. At first glance, it seems fair. Both sides gave something up, but fairness is not the same as effectiveness. The seller may still feel underpaid. You may still feel like you overspent. Neither side truly solved their underlying concerns. And this pattern happens everywhere, in business contracts, salary negotiations, partnerships, even personal relationships. Splitting the difference usually happens when both sides get tired of negotiating. It's not the best solution. It's simply the fastest escape from tension. And tension is something most people are uncomfortable with. But great negotiators understand something powerful. Tension is not the enemy. Tension is information. When people resist an offer, it means something important is hidden beneath the surface. Maybe there's fear, maybe there's pressure, maybe there's a constraint they haven't shared yet. The moment you rush to compromise, you stop exploring those deeper motivations. And the moment you stop exploring, you stop discovering opportunities. This is why the most skilled negotiators never rush toward the middle. Instead, they slow the process down. They ask questions. They uncover constraints. They explore alternatives. And sometimes they discover something surprising. The disagreement wasn't about price at all. Maybe the real issue was timing. Maybe it was risk. Maybe it was recognition. Maybe it was control. Once those deeper needs are revealed, solutions appear that neither side originally considered. Let me give you an example. Imagine a business owner negotiating a contract with a client. The client says, "The price is too high." An inexperienced negotiator immediately lowers the price, but a skilled negotiator pauses and asks a calibrated question. "What about the price feels challenging right now?" Suddenly the conversation changes. Maybe the client explains that their budget cycle doesn't renew for another 3 months. Now the issue isn't price, it's timing. Instead of lowering the price, the negotiator offers a payment schedule that begins later. Both sides win. The client stays within budget. The business owner protects their price. This is the difference between compromise and creative negotiation. Creative negotiation expands the possibilities. Compromise shrinks them. Now let's talk about another powerful principle, the illusion of control. People want to feel in control of their decisions. If someone feels forced into agreement, they resist, even if the deal benefits them. But when people feel like they arrived at the solution themselves, their commitment becomes stronger. This is why great negotiators ask calibrated questions instead of issuing commands. For example, instead of saying, "You need to lower your price," a skilled negotiator might ask, "How can we make this work within our budget?" Notice the difference. The second question invites the other person to solve the problem. And when people participate in solving a problem, they feel ownership of the solution. Ownership creates commitment. Commitment leads to durable agreements. Now let's explore something that often surprises people. A no is not the end of a negotiation. In fact, a no can be incredibly valuable. Most people fear hearing the word no. They interpret it as rejection, failure, finality. But in negotiation, a no often means something very different. Sometimes a no simply means, "I need more information." Sometimes it means, "I don't feel safe yet." Sometimes it means, "I'm protecting myself." When you treat a no as the beginning of a conversation rather than the end, the entire dynamic shifts. Instead of arguing, you become curious. You might respond with a calm question. "What about this doesn't work for you?" Now the other side begins explaining their concerns. And concerns are opportunities. Every concern reveals something important about what the other person values. And when you understand what someone values, you gain leverage, because negotiation is not about forcing agreement. It's about aligning interests. Let's connect this idea to financial outcomes. Many people unknowingly accept poor deals because they rush toward agreement too quickly. They fear losing the opportunity. They fear conflicting. They fear hearing no. But patience in negotiation often leads to better terms, higher compensation, stronger partnerships, more favorable contracts. Now, financial freedom isn't just about how much money you earn. It's also about how well you negotiate the terms surrounding that money. Your salary is negotiable. Your responsibilities are negotiable. Your deadlines are negotiable. Your equity is negotiable. Your opportunities are negotiable. But most people never explore these possibilities because they accept the first compromise presented to them. Master negotiators see things differently. They understand that every negotiation contains hidden flexibility. The key is uncovering it. And uncovering it requires patience, curiosity, and emotional awareness. Now imagine applying these ideas to everyday life. A parent negotiating bedtime with a child, a manager discussing deadlines with a team, a freelancer setting project boundaries with a client, a couple deciding how to divide responsibilities. In each situation, compromise might seem like the easiest solution. But if you pause, ask thoughtful questions, and explore deeper motivations, you often discover better answers. Answers that satisfy both sides without forcing anyone into reluctant agreement. Because the goal of negotiation is not to win the argument. The goal is to reach an agreement both sides believe is the best possible outcome, and that rarely happens by splitting the difference. In the next part, we're going to explore one of the most powerful tools in negotiation psychology, calibrated questions. These questions do something remarkable. They shift pressure away from you and gently place it on the other side, without aggression, without confrontation, without damaging the relationship. And once you understand how they work, you'll start noticing them everywhere, from business deals to everyday conversations. Now we arrive at one of the most powerful shifts in negotiation, one that feels counterintuitive at first, but becomes incredibly effective once you understand it. Most people believe negotiation power comes from having the strongest argument. But the real power often comes from asking the right question. Not ordinary questions, calibrated questions. Calibrated questions are designed to guide the conversation without triggering defensiveness. They don't attack. They don't accuse. They invite the other person to think. And thinking changes everything, because when someone begins solving a problem with you, the dynamic of the negotiation transforms. Instead of two people pushing against each other, you suddenly have two people working on the same puzzle. Let me show you how this works. Imagine you're negotiating a contract and the other side says your proposal is too expensive. A typical reaction might be to defend the price. You might explain the value, list features, or justify your reasoning. But this approach often creates resistance. Why? Because when people feel like they are being persuaded, they instinctively push back. Instead, a calibrated question might sound like this: how am I supposed to do that? Notice something important here. This question does not reject the other person's position. It does not argue you. It simply invites them to reconsider their demand. And suddenly the pressure shifts. The other person now has to explain how their request is reasonable. Many times they realize in the process of explaining it that their expectation may be unrealistic. This technique works because it preserves respect while introducing reality. Nobody feels attacked. Nobody loses face, yet the conversation moves forward. Let's look at another example. Suppose a client asks for a project deadline that you know is impossible. Instead of saying, "That timeline won't work," a calibrated question might be, "How would you like us to achieve that timeline?" Now the client begins thinking about the process involved. They start recognizing the complexity. They may even begin adjusting their own expectations. This is the subtle brilliance of calibrated questions. They allow the other person to discover the problem themselves. And people trust conclusions they reach on their own far more than conclusions forced upon them. Calibrated questions often begin with phrases like, "How?" These words open the door to thoughtful responses. But there is one word that skilled negotiators avoid using too often: why. Why questions can sometimes sound accusatory. When someone hears a "why did you do that?" their brain may interpret it as criticism. Instead, shifting the question slightly keeps the tone cooperative. For example, instead of saying, "Why did you choose that approach?" you might say, "What led you to that decision?" The meaning is similar, but the emotional tone is very different. Tone matters deeply in negotiation. People respond not only to the words you choose, but to the feeling behind them. Now let's talk about another fascinating psychological truth. When people feel like they are being forced into a corner, they fight. But when they feel respected and involved in the decision, they collaborate. Calibrated questions create that sense of involvement. They transform negotiation into joint problem solving. Think about how powerful that becomes in business. A manager negotiating resources with executives. An entrepreneur discussing investment terms. A freelancer defining project scope with a client. In each situation, the goal is not to overpower the other side. The goal is to guide the conversation toward a solution that works for both sides, and questions are the steering wheel. Now, let's connect this idea to leverage. Many people believe leverage comes from power or authority, but leverage often comes from understanding constraints. Every person you negotiate with has pressures you cannot see: deadlines, budgets, reputational concerns, internal politics. When you ask calibrated questions, those pressures begin to surface, and once you understand them, you gain strategic clarity. For example, imagine negotiating a business partnership. You ask, what challenges are you facing right now in growing this department? The answer might reveal internal struggles you never expected. Maybe their team is overwhelmed. Maybe leadership expects results quickly. Maybe they've had past partnerships fail. Suddenly, the negotiation becomes clearer. Instead of guessing what matters to them, you now know. And knowledge creates advantage. But here is the crucial detail. Calibrated questions must be delivered with patience. You cannot rush the process. After asking a thoughtful question, silence becomes your ally again. Allow the other person time to think. Sometimes the best negotiation moments happen in those quiet pauses. People reflect, they reconsider, they reveal more than they originally intended. Now let's discuss another important financial principle hidden inside negotiation. Value is rarely fixed. Value is shaped by perception. The same product, service, or opportunity can feel incredibly valuable to one person and completely uninteresting to another. The difference is context. Negotiation helps reveal that context. Through questions, listening, and empathy, you begin to understand what the other side truly values. And once you understand value from their perspective, you can frame solutions in ways that resonate more deeply. This is why negotiation is such a powerful life skill. It's not just about getting better deals, it's about understanding people, understanding their fears, understanding their motivations, understanding the invisible pressures shaping their decisions. When you see those forces clearly, conversations become easier, conflict decreases, agreements become stronger, and opportunities expand. Because every major opportunity in life eventually comes down to a conversation. A conversation about trust, a conversation about value, a conversation about commitment. And the people who navigate those conversations skillfully often achieve extraordinary results. In the next part of this journey, we'll explore a concept that may surprise you. It's about the word most negotiators fear hearing: no. No. Most people try desperately to avoid it. But in reality, a no can be one of the most powerful turning points in a negotiation. Once you understand why, you will never fear that word again. In fact, you might start welcoming it. Let's talk about a word that most people fear in negotiation. Oh, no. The moment people hear it, they assume the conversation is over. The deal is dead. The opportunity has disappeared. And so they do everything possible to avoid hearing it. They soften their requests. They rush to compromise. They lower their expectations. All because they want to stay in the safe zone of yes. But here is the truth most people never realize. Yes can be dangerous in negotiation. Yes often hides hesitation. Yes can mean a maybe. Yes can mean I'll think about it. Yes can mean I'll think about it. Yes can mean I want to end this conversation politely. In many cases, a quickie yes is simply a way for someone to escape pressure. But a no is different. A no is honest. A no is protective. When someone says no, they are telling you something real. They are revealing a boundary, a concern, or a hidden constraint. And that information is incredibly valuable. In fact, when people feel comfortable saying no, they often feel safer continuing the conversation. Think about it for a moment. When someone knows they are allowed to say no, they feel less trapped. Their guard drops. They become more open to discussion. This is why skilled negotiators sometimes design questions that invite a no. Instead of asking, is this a good time to talk? They might ask, is this a bad time to talk? That small shift gives the other person control. It allows them to feel safe responding honestly. And once they feel safe, the conversation can continue naturally. Safety is one of the most underrated forces in negotiation. People rarely agree to deals when they feel pressured, cornered, or manipulated. But when they feel respected and in control, their willingness to collaborate increases dramatically. This leads us to another powerful technique: the strategic use of a no-oriented questions. These questions allow the other person to protect themselves while still engaging with you. For example, would it be ridiculous to explore a different timeline? Or would it be out of the question to consider another option? These questions invite a negative response, but that negative response often keeps the conversation alive. When someone replies a no, that wouldn't be ridiculous, they are actually opening the door to further discussion. And suddenly the negotiation moves forward. Now let's explore another critical insight. Behind every a no is a reason. Sometimes that reason is practical. Budget constraints. Time limitations, competing priorities. Other times the reason is emotional. Fear of making the wrong decision, fear of losing control, fear of appearing weak. When you treat a no as valuable information rather than rejection, you gain the opportunity to explore those reasons. You might ask, what about this doesn't work for you? Or what would need to change for this to become possible? These questions shift the conversation from conflict to discovery, and discovery is where real negotiation power lives. Now let's talk about trust. Trust is not built through clever arguments or persuasive speeches. Trust is built through consistent signals of respect and understanding. When someone sees that you are not trying to force them into agreement, their perception of you changes. They stop seeing you as an opponent. They begin seeing you as a partner in problem solving. That shift can completely transform a negotiation. Imagine you're discussing a business deal with a potential partner. They say they're hesitant to move forward. An inexperienced negotiator might try to push harder, presenting more arguments or pressure. But a skilled negotiator might respond with curiosity. It sounds like there are some concerns here. That simple observation invites the other person to share more. And when they do, you gain clarity. Maybe they are worried about financial risk. Maybe they had a bad experience with a previous partner. Maybe their team is not fully convinced yet. Once you understand the real concern, you can address it directly, and addressing the real concern is far more effective than guessing. This process requires patience. Negotiation is rarely about quick victories. It is about building momentum through understanding. Small discoveries lead to better questions. Better questions lead to deeper insights. And deeper insights lead to stronger agreements. Now let's connect this to something practical: financial leverage. Many people believe financial success depends purely on talent or hard work, but negotiation plays a huge role. Every contract you sign, every salary discussion, every partnership agreement, every investment decision, all of these involve negotiation. And the people who approach these conversations with patience, curiosity, and emotional awareness often secure dramatically better outcomes, better terms, better compensation, better opportunities. Financial freedom is not just about earning more. It is about negotiating wisely, protecting your value, understanding the motivations of others, and creating agreements that benefit both sides over the long term. When you learn to embrace a no, you unlock a powerful advantage. You stop fearing rejection. You start exploring possibilities. An exploration is where great deals are born. In the final part of this journey, we will bring everything together. We will look at how all these principles, empathy, mirroring calibrated questions, and the power of a no combine to create a negotiation strategy that works not only in business, but in every area of life. Because negotiation is not just a skill. It is a way of understanding people. And once you master that understanding, you will begin seeing opportunities everywhere. Now let's bring everything together. Because negotiation, when you strip away the techniques and tactics, is really about one thing: understanding people. Not overpowering them, not outsmarting them. Understanding them. And once you truly understand the other side, what they fear, what they value, what pressures they're under, you gain something far more powerful than leverage. You gain clarity. Most negotiations fail not because the offer was bad, but because the conversation never reached the real problem. People argue about numbers when the real issue is trust. They argue about timelines when the real issue is fear. They argue about control when the real issue is uncertainty. But when you learn to slow down the conversation, listen deeply, and guide the dialogue with empathy, something remarkable begins to happen. The negotiation stops feeling like a fight. It starts feeling like a problem being solved together, and that shift changes everything. Let's go back to the beginning. The first principle we explored was tactical empathy, the ability to recognize and acknowledge the emotions driving the other person's decisions. This doesn't mean you surrender your position. It means you show the other side that you understand their perspective. And when people feel understood, their defenses drop. Their minds open. Conversations become productive instead of confrontational. Then we talked about mirroring. The simple act of repeating key words from the other person's statement. It sounds almost too easy to matter, yet it unlocks something. You become someone others trust to navigate complex decisions. Someone who can resolve tension instead of escalating it. Someone who creates solutions where others see conflict. And that reputation becomes incredibly valuable. Because in a world full of noise, pressure, and competing interests, the person who can negotiate calmly and effectively stands out. They open doors others cannot open. They build partnerships others cannot build. They create opportunities others never even see. And that is the real power of negotiation. Not manipulation, not control, understanding. When you understand people deeply enough, agreement becomes far easier to reach, and once you master that skill, you realize something important. Negotiation is not just a professional tool, it is a life skill. One that shapes your relationships, your opportunities, and ultimately your future. Because the quality of your life is often determined by the quality of the agreements you make, and those agreements are shaped by how well you negotiate.